Hi, welcome back to Disability Landscape. I'm Charlie Bros. I'm here with my partner Mark Knudsen, and we have another great guest for you today. Mark, who do we have?
Yeah, today we're going to be talking with the director of the Center for Accessibility Resources at Metropolitan State University. And let's welcome Kristin Burgess to the show.
Kristin, good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
And glad to hear you too.
Yeah, we've had our share of glitches, and we're glad it's going good today.
So far, so good.
So,
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead,
I'll
Mark.
start off. Just looking at your website as we discussed previously, just kind of talk about, we're going to talk about things that I've noticed from your website, and you talk about accommodations, and I'll just list some of the things you put under accommodations, and then if you could talk about that. But under the accommodations, you have ASL interpreting, communication access real time, alternative text format, assistive technology, animals, and test accommodations. So, I was barely able to speak that all out, but I would assume you can talk about at least quite a bit of that.
and just an aside, Mark's idea of test accommodations is having someone take the test for him.
Yeah, I haven't found that yet. But if you could talk about the variety of accommodations that you offer at Metropolitan State University, that would be great.
Yeah. So really, sky's the limit when it comes to accommodations. And the great part is that they're all individually done. So I tell people all the time, we could have 10 people with the same diagnoses, but they're going to have 10 very different accommodation letters because they're all tailored to how those individuals experience their disability. So the ones on our website are some pretty common ones, but really, as long as we're not doing anything retroactively or we're not altering essential elements of a course or a program, sky's the limit. So we've done all of those things. Big ones, obviously, testing accommodations, that's pretty common within higher ed. But we've also done some really different things, like asking instructors to ask the entire class for their preferred pronouns. So that we're creating access for someone who comes from a marginalized gender or sexual identity area, and we do some other common things that seem kind of common sense, like written instructions, because instructors talk a lot, and sometimes they give those instructions verbally, and while you're trying to scramble and take down those notes, you miss that middle step. So having something like written instructions can be a critical accommodation for some of our students.
Okay. So when it comes to the accommodations for the students that you're laying out, do you meet with the students beforehand, kind of get a feel for what they want, and they can even verbalize or give you an idea of what accommodations they're going to need so you can get them all set up?
Yep, absolutely. So every student goes through what we call a welcome interview process. That's our initial meeting with them, where we review any documentation and also what their self-report is, what they feel their needs are. So that's where we discuss those barriers that they experience and then come up with, I call it their toolbox.
Sure.
Because I view the accommodations as their tools to use as they need them. Because I'm not them. I'm not sitting in those classes. I shouldn't be deciding that for them.
And then, as they go through their education, and if those needs change, you obviously can meet with them again and to shape those accommodations to better help them.
Yes, absolutely. And Metro, we're a little bit different from some of the more traditional schools in that we tend to see our students like 2 times in their career. One, at their welcome welcome interview, and then the second time at graduation where we get to say, congratulations, you did this, way to go. But absolutely, their letters are living documents. We change them as we need to. We just try really hard to get them set to the most robust toolbox we can in that initial meeting, since we know we probably won't see them very often.
One of the things I was thinking about, like with the service animals and that, do you then I'm not sure how you would go about it, but do you do any training, not necessarily training, but letting students know who aren't using the dog, to the general students, how to not interact, or I mean, most people know not to interact anyways, but do you guys touch upon that at all by chance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do some training with our staff and faculty. And then when we know that we have a student going into a classroom with a service animal, we ask faculty to send out a service animal etiquette information sheet to all of the students in their class for a couple of reasons. One, we want to educate those students about things like not interacting while the animal's working.
Right, yeah, exactly, yep.
Yep. We also want to know if there are going to be any potential impacts to other students in the class, right? Because then it's a conversation with those other students about whether it's an allergy or just a fear. Or,
Right. I know some students are afraid of my service armadillo, so.
Not a service animal if it's an armadillo. It would be a companion or emotional support.
Yeah,
animal.
well, it's my emotional
But we talk about
support.
that on the website too.
Yeah, no emotional support lizards in the class, please.
Well, that's up to the interactive process, right? So that's asking us to make an accommodation to our no pets policy. So theoretically, if we went through that interactive process and determined that it was a reasonable accommodation, there could be an emotional armadillo or lizard in a classroom space.
Well, and kind of a case in point, there's a young lady in the Hennepin School District who has severe anxiety, and she has a small dog that would bring with her almost daily to class. But as her anxiety eased, she was able to, not bring the dog. And I think her classmates are disappointed because they missed the dog. But
yeah, absolutely.
But you talk about the service animals and you're not supposed to touch them. But I'm the kind of guy that when I see a dog, it's like, oh, puppy, come here. No, can't do that.
Right. It's a tough thing. I always catch myself the same way too. Is my first instinct, and then the second instinct, Mark, what are you thinking here? Don't be, you should know that. Don't be doing that and that. So
yeah, we have a student who has a miniature husky as her service dog.
Oh wow!
And we had to have a conversation that yes, absolutely, service dog allowed in those spaces, but that she as the handler would have to be extra diligent in reminding people about the etiquette because the dog is just so stinking cute.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I see where you're going. Yeah, I thought you were going with,
yeah.
I mean, I know you said miniature, but when I think husky, the size, but right, yeah, and you're right. Yeah, the huskies are, you can't but pet them and that, so. But I'm getting on to another topic. Also, you talk about outreach and education and some of the things under there. You talk about event planning, universal design, and technology access. If you could elaborate more on the outreach and education.
Yeah, we really try hard, even though our primary charge is to help our students with their accommodation needs. We have a much broader scope as well, and that is to help educate our staff and faculty as well as the broader community. So we really take pride in being able to offer those educational sessions to that broader community, whether that's around something like service animals versus an emotional support animal, or just what does access mean? What is the medical model of disability versus the social model? We do a lot of stuff, and a lot of it then falls under that umbrella of universal design, where it's really making things better for everybody. And we really try to use that as a framework because it moves us away from the us versus them conversation. And people thinking that something that's an accommodation is really preferential treatment when it's not. It's leveling that playing field for folks. So we work really hard to partner with a lot of our community members, and we've got an event coming up in October where we're partnering with a bunch of folks to help celebrate the 30th anniversary of ADA, as well as National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So that's one of those pieces where we get to share that educational component with folks.
That is great.
Through some of...
Now, in technology access, what does that kind of entail? I see the captioning, audio description. How is it applying, like the creating content you said here, and getting accessible IT, that kind of thing? But yeah, the tech accessibility. What are some of the broader points there that you deal with?
So I think the biggest thing is that it's a huge piece of meat to chew on, right?
Yeah.
To make things accessible it's a long laundry list. And if you're looking at that creating content page, that's kind of a checklist of those basic things you should be looking for when you're creating documents or websites or what have you. And it's a long list. And so the big thing we try to get across to folks is, start with one thing at a time. Because we know that it's really overwhelming and you're not going to get it all perfect right out of the gate. So one of the things that we have really worked hard with our folks to do is run the accessibility checker. It's not foolproof. You can still get a green check and it's not 100% accessible, but it's a whole lot better than if you didn't run it at all, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we offer those trainings. We also like to, again, partner with a bunch of folks. We've got the Minnesota IT folks that have a great set of modules around creating accessible Word documents, and some other folks as well. So we like to share those resources because we're not about reinventing the wheel if we don't have to.
Right. And, if you have somebody that's mobility impaired, difficulty typing, that kind of, can you offer like a speech to text type software, or for a vision impaired person, a text to speech type software?
Yep. Yeah, we've got some really great software programs available that we recently made available to everyone in the campus community. One of which is called Read and Write. And that allows you to not only convert text to speech, but also do the reverse. So when I tell students about using it, I'm like, so for those moments when you can get that paper from your brain to your mouth, but you can't get it from your brain to your hands. So that's the time to use that. But there are other great tools out there too. I mean, Google has a great speech to text program that takes very little training in order for people to get it to work reasonably well. Obviously, you still got to go back in and edit, but it's not like the old days of Dragon where you spent 10 years training it and it still didn't recognize your words very well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then another thing that I had seen looking into your Center for Accessibility Resources, and this may have nothing to do, this just may be pure faculty stuff, but under there it was listed CAR for faculty. It involved curricular access, syllabus statements, tools, and resource. Is that something just purely in-house, or is that something involved with students in that?
Yeah, like I said, we try to be a resource for everybody in our community, and because we interact so much with faculty, we set up some resources specifically for them, because they're creating their own content. We want to make sure that that's accessible from the get-go, because it saves us a lot of work on the backside. But we also want to make sure that they understand, what sorts of things they can put into their course designs that make things better for all of their students, right? And I teach too, so it's sometimes it's coming at them from that peer level, where I can say, hey, when I design my courses, here's what I do to make sure that everybody can have access. Might want to think about putting that into one of your courses versus me coming at them from that legal compliance side and saying, well, now you have to do this because we're not in compliance.
One thing I'm kind of curious about is that with the population there at Metropolitan State of, students with disabilities, do you find them going into all areas as far as studies? I mean, from computers to maybe, I don't know if you guys do politics at Metropolitan, but as far as their studies are concerned, are the students pretty well mixed in what their
studies are?
What their studies are, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. They are all across the board in our different colleges. Although I will say, if there is one area that is more prevalent than another, it's our College of Individualized Studies, where people can create their own degree.
Oh, really?
Which is, it's a fantastic program. Back in the day when Metro started, I believe 50 years ago, this coming year, it was known as First College. It's really what was the bread and butter of Metropolitan State. And still is to this day, but it allows people to incorporate that prior learning, whether that was at another institution or in the work that they've done through their lives. But when our average age is like 32, we have a lot of life experience to share, and you darn well should get credit for that.
Right,
So,
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really popular program, but we are definitely all across the board in terms of where our students are studying.
That is great. And this may seem a little kind of, in dealing with people with disabilities, are there any professors or educators there within Metropolitan State that themselves have physical disabilities?
Yeah, I wish there were more that felt comfortable, disclosing and being kind of out of the closet on that. But certainly it's not just me. I'm not the only faculty member with a disability, nor am I the only staff member with a disability. But we could certainly use some more.
Well, that's good.
Are you saying there are some, but they just don't want to identify as being someone with a disability? They've got the hidden disability then?
Yeah, it's, faculty are an interesting breed of people, and
I always thought my teachers were. Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
it's kind of a cutthroat sort of industry to be in, and unfortunately there's a whole lot of stigma there that still exists, and so particularly, like just with our students, more than 80% of our students that we work with have hidden or invisible disabilities like mental health concerns.
Oh, right, yeah.
And our faculty mirror that in some degree, and so it's harder for them to disclose that to their peers without being seen as different.
Okay, that's unfortunate because disabled people are out and about and everywhere in society, and they should be not afraid to be identified.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
So I don't have anything more at this point, Mark.
No, I offhand I can't think of any. I will say this was real interesting, and that just to see all the things that are involved, and like we kind of drilled down on the service animals, which was interesting in itself. In that, so no, I think we're
well. Kristin, I do have one last thing. We're in the era of COVID, and life is not the same. Is Metropolitan State doing then the distance learning, the online learning, and how the accommodations working out in that respect?
Great question. So Metro State has opted to remain almost entirely remote. We have a small percentage of classes that are happening in a hybrid environment where they have limited in-person interactions that are all appropriately physically distanced, and people are wearing their masks and all that. And interestingly enough, accommodation-wise, it's kind of outside of some things like captioning and audio description. I think it's actually minimized people's needs for accommodations. The
Sure.
bulk of accommodations that happen tend to be more in that in-person environment. That tends to be the space that requires more accommodations because there are more barriers.
Right.
But yeah, I would say that outside of the captioning and audio description piece, which should be happening anyway, but because we're using more video content,
Right.
and everything's online, it's more important for those things to be there than ever.
That's a great point. And do they find that any students are having difficulty with the distance learning? It's been said, there's kind of an argument for and against that some do better with in-person versus distance.
Sure, absolutely. We definitely have had students who are not thriving in
Yeah.
this online environment. It's really a struggle. I just had a student the other day who ended up having to drop a course because it was completely asynchronous, and although the instructor had initially thought that they were going to have some weekly check-ins via Zoom, they weren't able to do that given the asynchronous nature of the course. So that student now felt that they were not going to be able to be successful in that course without those weekly check-ins. So they ended up dropping it. But certainly it happens, and we definitely see that there are students who benefit more from having that in-person environment. So they are certainly missing that at this point. And who knows what the future will bring, but it will definitely look different than what we've seen in the past. I don't think we're going to be going back to what we used to know as typical.
Right. You won't be having the full lecture halls or classrooms and that type of thing. It'll be smaller group type education experiences. And
Yep.
a lot of students also work collaboratively. Study groups, things like that. Do you encourage something online in that respect?
Yeah, we encourage study groups all the time, whether we're in person or remote, and utilize some of our other resources like our TRIO program to help facilitate that as well. But certainly any of our folks that want to try and get together, either in an in-person or virtual space to help each other out, we're all about supporting that.
Okay. Well, Kristin, this has been a great conversation.
I got one last.
Oh, Mark's
I got
got
one last
more.
quick question. Since during this interview, I wanted to just ask you, what are the fishes you have in that fish tank?
Oh, yeah, that's my companions over there, my coworkers.
Right.
So basically, this tank is full of a bunch of neon tetras and a couple tiger loaches, but yeah, there's a bigger tank out in the living room that has some gigantic bala sharks, and that's a big 75-gallon tank.
Wow.
Not nearly as colorful, but much bigger fish.
Well, with that, we're definitely going to maybe in a couple of months have to do a follow-up interview with you so you can be in front of the big tank.
There we go. Yeah, I'll move to the bigger fish tank and less of Command Central behind me.
Right.
There we go. Well, Kristin Burgess, thank you very much for joining us today. Mark?
Yep. Thank you, Kristin. Always a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future on that. So
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been
All
a
right.
great experience.
Thank you.
thank you.
He's Mark Knutson. I'm Charlie Brose. This has been Disability Landscape. We'll see you next time.